And just before we get going, if you take a look at the bottom of the slide, we've listed our project partners. So we have Lelum Naogh, the Global Footprint Network, the BCIT ecoCity Center, and the SGI CRC, so the Southern Gulf Islands Community Resource Center. And I'd also like to recognize our funders, the Pacific Institute for Climate Solutions, Vancouver Foundation, and Eco-Canada for making the development of this project possible. Now, just before going over the agenda, I'm going to run a quick poll so we can get an idea of where we're all tuning in from today. Oops. So if you can just indicate where you are today. Just give you another 10 seconds to put in your answer. Perfect. So as you can see, a lot of us are tuning in from Galiano Island, so that's great. And we're happy to have people joining from the other Gulf Islands, as well as the surrounding areas as well. So now for an overview of what we'll be going over today. Shar Wilson from Lelum Naogh will start off with a land acknowledgement, and she'll also introduce Lelum Naogh. Next, Dr. Jennie Moore from the BCIT ecoCity Center will provide us with some background knowledge on the ecological footprint. And then Dr. Beate will share her experience calculating the ecological footprint of a small island in Germany. After our speaker series, I will share what we plan to do here on Galiano Island, and I'll also let you know of different opportunities to get involved. Finally, Adam will guide us through a discussion where we'll split into breakout groups. And before closing, Adriana will provide us with a summary of the session, and we'll also do a quick feedback survey. So now I'm going to hand it over to you, Shar. Many of you will know Shar. She is the Chief Financial Officer for Siem Bay Enterprise and the manager of Lelum Naogh First Nation. We are very excited that Lelum Naogh has joined as a partner with us on this project. So
thank you. Yeah, thank you, Louisa. Yeah. So I come to you from the traditional territories of Lelum Naogh First Nations, who are the Coast Salish peoples of Galiano Island. This group of peoples has been on this island long before anybody came to the island, and have held their responsibilities as a steward of this island, as well as along with our counterparts on all the other islands. So I welcome you to the Coast Salish territories of Galiano Island and the southern Vancouver Gulf Islands. A little bit about Lelum Naogh. So Lelum, as a lot of you know, means house in Halkaminam, and Naogh is the name of our matriarch, who is the mother of many of the families on Galiano Island. She was also partner to Henry Scotty Georgeson, who was the housekeeper or the lighthouse keeper on Main Island for 36 years. Through her time there, she fed her children, she birthed a lot of her children and her grandchildren. The children practiced commerce and trade from both Main and Galiano Island, and she moved fluidly between the Galiano and Main Islands because they homesteaded on Galiano first before taking over the lighthouse on Main Island. So just a quick family history tree is that she and Henry had 5 children, and the eldest was John Georgeson. And John Georgeson married another Indigenous woman from Nanaimo, and her name was Elizabeth. And John and Elizabeth had 10 children. And so of these 10 children, that's how you get the families, Baines, Wilson, Sylvie, Head, Georgeson, Brown, Stevens, and Maberly. So you have all these families coming from these two people. And the third brother down was William Georgeson, and that's where a lot of you might know, that's where we have Johnny Georgeson, Gordon Georgeson, and Rosemary Georgeson. So this family has totally been in service to the Gulf Islands, Maine and Galiano, since the beginning of establishment on Galiano. They've created the roads. A lot of the roads that you see on Galiano are named after them. They help build schools. They help build, halls. They took part in the community as early as, I think the earliest recording we have is 1860, where it was recorded in the history of, in our history anyways, in the books that we have. So some people have been asking, well, why now? Why are you starting to organize now? Well, we've always been informally organized, being from, we followed the kinship model of taking care of each other when things are good and when things are bad. And when we've always worked together when it comes to, creating work for our families. And so that's one of the things that we always, I've always, been amazed at how strong and how talented this family is. And we're water people. We run boats, we fish, we boom logs, we gill net, we seine, we do long lining. And so that's part of the food sovereignty that we practiced with Sarah Teneo taught her children. There was records of how many deer the boys would bring over to New Westminster or Ladysmith, to sell or trade. And then there's records of us trading with the Penelakut. We'd bring them ducks and deer, and then so there's always been commerce and trade with this family on these islands. It just wasn't pronounced, I guess you would say. So I'm really happy that that we've now established ourselves on what is Whaler Bay, but what the elders call CM Bay, because CM Bay means honored one, which is where CM Bay Enterprises comes from. So the purpose of our group is to, first of all, take care of our own, take care of our elders, our youth, and our vulnerable, and try to create some housing and try to create some economic wealth for our people. And when I was approached to be a part of this, if our society would be a proud part of this, I brought it to the board, and they were very happy that first of all, they were being recognized and acknowledged, because an acknowledgement isn't just saying thank you for being on the unceded lands of whoever. Acknowledgement is actually looking at the human beings that you're trying to acknowledge and recognizing them as human beings and working with them and inviting them to your table and inviting them into your houses or inviting them into your business. That's true acknowledgement. Acknowledgement isn't just saying, I'm honored to be working here. That's not acknowledgement. So when Adam called me and said, we acknowledge you, I really felt that this is the first time that I had watched acknowledgement in practice. So I just Adam for doing that, coming to us and saying, we want to work with you and partner with you. And that's just to build a relationship. So that's how things are started. And we had a discussion about, sustainability. But before we go into that, I see that you talk about one footprint. Well, Indigenous people, we have one heart, but we have many different cultures, many different languages. We have many different ways of being. But ultimately we have one heart, and the one heart is in alignment with sustainability. What does sustainability mean to an Indigenous person? Well, to me, it means that when Sarah Teneo first came here, and I think she was always here, but we can't prove that. So everybody needs the books and the writing to prove that. But by all accounts, we know she was here because she knew the water. And you can't run active pass any old time. You have to understand when to run active pass. You can't just go into the water, otherwise you're going to be swept away because it runs so fast. And so Sarah Teneo practiced food sovereignty. She practiced trade, and she taught her children how to live off the land. And then, so this was for my grandchild 9 generations ago. So what we want is we want to have Sarah Teneo way of life available for my grandchild's great grandchild. That's true sustainability. Is you're taking something that your grandmother had and you're thinking about the life and the earth. And in Galiano, it's really easy to see that because it's such a small island. So I think about how it was for her back then, not just how hard it was, but I think about how plentiful she thought the islands were, with the fishing, with the deer, with the, with the seaweed even. We don't even have that seaweed anymore on the beaches to eat. And so is that going to be there for my 9 times great grandchild? That's, to me, that's how you live a sustainable life, is can one meet the other? And say my hands are up here. So that's really important to think about. Like, so everything I do, or everything we decide to do, I think about, well, how does it not affect me, but how does that affect my grandchild? So sustainability is I think is grounding yourself and stepping back and stepping up and seeing Galiano for what it really is. And it has limited resources. Our elders are talking about the deer on the island, and that was a huge topic because a lot of them were dying. Well, one of the things that we're discussing is how the deer have changed in size in just 20 years. So how does a deer become, you look at a buck and you can see a deer that's about 150 to 200 pounds, and it's a nice buck, but nowadays you can't find that. You can't find a deer that's 200 pounds because they're all so tiny now, and they're just so plentiful. And another thing that we talked about is the seaweed on the, not just the kelp, I'm talking about the seaweed on the rocks. There's hardly any seaweed. There's no clams in CM Bay or Whaler Bay anymore. Oysters, there's no oysters and that's within 20 years. So if you think about 20 years is a minute in the whole scheme of things. So I think that partnering or just getting to the same table as everybody else and start talking about these things and what it means to Indigenous people, and to acknowledge Lelum Sarah Teneo is a really, really great step. I think it's a good step in this project, and I'm looking forward to seeing what we can create out of this project. Our objective in joining Adam in this project and the Conservancy, our objective is to expand the worldview of our members, to teach our neighbors, and to meet, reintroduce our neighbors to who our people are, because, our elders have been here forever. And I'm really, really, they've lived, somehow they flew under the radar of the Indian Act. The Indian Act came about in 1876. And then you start talking about reservations, residential schools. You start talking about taking away economy from the Indigenous people. The Indian Act was meant to control us and keep us in this little bubble. Well, the families on this island, they stayed under the radar somehow, and they didn't go to reserves. They didn't go to residential schools. But what did happen was there was loss of culture. So you can't win. This is what happened. So they lost their language. The reason I say that is because they lost their language. They don't speak their language. And they don't have their dances. They don't have their songs. Whatever Sarah Naogh had, she wasn't able to transfer it down for whatever reason. But people often wonder, when I was talking to a lawyer about who we were, and he was a lawyer for Delgamuukh, for Sparrow, for all of the big cases, the top 10 cases, he was there. And he said it's amazing that this family has survived, and I'm inclined to agree with him. So in talking to him and realizing that they flew under the radar, but they also lost, they also lost their indigeneity. They weren't recognized as Indigenous people until 2 weeks ago. So I'm so happy to, share with you that after, writing, taking my pen and turning it into a sword, that we managed to get 4 generations of this family recognized by the federal government as Indigenous people. And they're actually, it's kind of a funny thing. We're happy to be recognized by the registrar and being put on a registry. So we're put on the registry, but that's the Canada that we live in, right? So, even though that has happened, we still practice our sovereignty, our food sovereignty. I had cod the other night that we caught. We caught for our elders, and we gave food to our elders. We caught deer and we ground it up, and we're dispersing it, weekly for our elders so that they have food on a continuous basis. We have vegetables that we're sharing. This is something that a community does, and this is what we're doing as a community. We're trying our best to continue on and in a sustainable way. And that's what I hope participating in this project will do, is like to be at the table, to have a voice, and to be part of the one heart and the one mind that we have the one heart, you have the one mind. It's a good combination as far as I'm concerned. So with that, I just want to say thank you, Hachka CM. I'm looking forward to this project. I'm looking forward to meeting a lot of you once this COVID is done. And if you have any questions, I've put my email address in the chat, so send me an email. And we'll see you in the near future. So thanks a lot. Thank you, Adam and Louisa.
Shar, thank you so much for kicking this off in the right way, and for your words, and for introducing Lelum Naogh. Do you mind if we post the PDF document that you created on the chat?
No, please do. Yeah. Just to put a backdrop, I created a document that sort of summarized when we how we came to be on Galiano and what we think has happened. So it's more or less, it's a timeline from 1850, I think it is 1850 to now. So that's what he's going to post.
Great. So Adam, are you good to post that then? Okay. So
yes, I'm just looking for it right now. I'll find it and post it.
Sounds good. So yeah, thank you again, Shar. Like Adam said, that's like perfect framing for our session, and we're really excited to be working with you throughout the rest of this project. So I'll bring my screen back up again. So next up on the agenda today, we have Dr. Jennie Moore. Dr. Jennie Moore is the director at the Institute of Sustainability at the British Columbia Institute of Technology and leads its ecoCity Center of Excellence. She was the program convener of the 2019 ecoCity World Summit held in Vancouver, and serves as a core advisor to the international ecoCity standards. Dr. Moore is the creator of the ecoCity Footprint tool that helps cities and citizens identify pathways to sustainable consumption and lifestyles. She serves on the UN Habitat Urban Monitoring Framework Task Team and leads the International Union for the Conservation of Nature's Technical Working Group on the telecoupled impacts of cities on global biodiversity. Previously, Dr. Moore was Metro Vancouver's first air quality planner in charge of climate action, first demand-side management planner curbing consumption to address bioregional capacity, and first coordinator of the Sustainable Region Initiative, developing a sustainability framework to coordinate and guide development of regional plans. So thank you for joining us today, Dr. Moore. And I'll stop sharing my screen and then you can start with your presentation. We'll just see if that works.
I have a note here that says if I do this, this will stop other sharing screens. Do you want to continue? I think I will.
Yeah, it'll just be my notes.
Okay. So I'm having a problem finding what I want to share. Give me a sec.
No worries.
I think I might, I'm not sure what to do. I might be in the wrong field for this.
Oh, we could see it there for a second.
Yeah, I can't see in the Zoom. So if I share screens, what I'm sharing is what I'm seeing, but that's not what I want to be sharing. I want to share my presentation. I have a feeling I'm in your, as a presenter mode. I really don't know what to do. It's not what I want to be sharing. You don't see my presentation, do you? You just see me.
We see your presentation.
Oh, you do?
See the PowerPoint. Yep.
Awesome. Okay. There. Okay. You see it?
Yeah, it's perfect. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you so much.
No problem.
All right. So thank you, everybody. And thank you, Shar, for sharing your story. That's it really is wonderful to be able to hear the perspective and the history and also the definition of sustainability, which I totally agree with. So I'm coming to you from Vancouver, the unceded territory of the Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam people. And I'm going to be presenting on ecological footprint analysis, helping you get a sense of the methodology and how it works for measuring a living within Earth's carrying capacity. So our learning outcomes for today, hopefully I'll be able to give you a sense of what measuring your demand for urban ecosystems looks like, and hopefully challenge a little bit of thinking about what's rural and what's urban, talk to you about ecological footprint analysis and the methodology, and then thinking about how that applies to living within Earth's carrying capacity so we can support the One Island, One Earth initiative. So just a bit of context. First of all, I think it's really important for us to understand that we're living now in what's called the age of the Anthropocene. So Shar talked about how even in the last 20 years, access to basic resources on the island are beginning to be limited. Well, that's happening all around the world. Today, humanity takes up to 84% of global net primary production, meaning what Earth produces, to support humans. So that means there's not a lot left for people. At the same time, we're all moving into cities. So this is coinciding with the great global urban transition. And so when we talk about living in the age of the Anthropocene, what we're talking about now is the world where humans are the dominant driving force in shaping Earth's terrestrial systems. So let me say that again. Humans, we are the dominant force shaping Earth's terrestrial systems today. In the last 20 years, we've appropriated 60% of the wild, right? There's almost no wild anymore. That's a kind of a myth for people now, that we still think there's this vast expanse of wilderness. So from an ecological perspective, and ecological footprinting comes out of this approach, natural capital is the only true source of production. So when we humans produce anything, actually all we're doing is taking nature's resources, applying our intellect, and manufacturing or repurposing that into new quote unquote products. But natural capital refers ultimately to the stocks of natural assets that yield the services all life depends on. So photosynthesis, pollination to produce food, photosynthesis, right, to generate through chemical energy, the biomass that then we eat or convert into other things. Ultimately, fossil fuels are an ancient form of that original chemical reaction in photosynthesis. Evaporation, transpiration that drives our hydrological cycle. So this is where natural capital comes from, and this is what the ecological footprint is based on. When we think about our lifestyles, we tend to often, and I would argue falsely, separate rural from urban. And there's different definitions. One definition to be rural is that you live in a low density area, like the photo at the bottom there. You know, you might have a vehicle. If you have a vehicle, and if your water comes from a system that's not an artesian well on your property, if you use urban connections for information, if your primary source of income is not derived from harvesting net primary production off your own land to feed your own selves, you're urban. And so there's probably, you know, and I think in Galiano Island, there's probably a mix of urban and rural dwellers, but a lot of us are actually living urban lifestyles. We're just happening to live them in a rural context. So I think that's really also very important to keep in mind as we start thinking about the impacts of our lifestyles. And remember, I talked about that global urban transition. It is about people moving into cities, but simultaneously, it's also many, many people now have access to technologies that are enabling us to live rural lifestyles no matter where we choose to put our bodies. And so this urban impact is driving a huge demand, as I mentioned, on the planet. So trying to manage these things is what we're really trying to assess with ecological footprinting. So getting down to basics, net primary production, there's about 12 billion hectares of ecologically productive land and sea area on the planet, which is about 51 billion hectares in total surface. A lot of it is oceans, vast oceans and desert areas. They have marginal ecological production, but we're talking about the 12 billion hectares of active ecological, so the boreal forests, the Amazon rainforests, all the croplands that are previously usually converted from forests into fields or natural grasslands. And then that fishing area right around the coastal zone. So we have 7.8 billion people on Earth today, and that comes out to approximately 1.5 hectares of ecologically productive land available to each person if we were going to live sustainably and distribute that equally amongst ourselves. And these numbers are starting to get very scary when you think that it takes just half a hectare to produce the food we need to survive. So as we are really getting to that place where I used to argue consumption was the big issue, much more so than population, but we're at a point now where even the lowest consumers, if we're getting past 12 billion people, we will have a very hard time to secure our livelihoods. So understanding this urban-rural connection and what that means by the numbers in terms of scientific evidence for living sustainably. If we think about it in terms of the urban ecosystem, there's a city, which is a physical location, but the actual area that supports people living in that city is in this vast rural context, not just immediately adjacent to the city, but all around the world. Through global trade, we have access to resources all around the world. And it's not distinct. So there's rural communities that are fundamentally involved in subsidiary agriculture and providing food and resources that are being shipped out to those rural, to those urban areas. But we're also living urban lifestyles often within more rural communities as well. So the same relationship exists for smaller communities if they're people are deriving their income fundamentally through you know, working at office work or trading goods or other things. So when we think about moving towards living within Earth's carrying capacity, we're really also talking about bioregionalism, and ecoCities is very heavily influenced by that. It's an ecologically healthy city where people are living ecologically sustainable lives, as much in a self-sustaining way as possible, but obviously we need to trade in some ways, provided that it's fair and truly accounts for ecological costs. So very quickly going from these dimensions of sustainability, thinking about three pillars that need to be balanced in reality. What we're talking about is a nested hierarchy of systems where everything is based on ecosystem health, from which society evolved, from which our economy, in terms of how we agree to trade with each other, evolved. So you don't have a planet, you don't have people, you don't have people, you don't have an economy. The flip side is that the economy exerts influence on our society, and then by turn, society influence is influences and exerts pressure on the environment. So there is a dynamic two-way relationship here. And we understand that everything comes from ecosystems from which we extract our natural resources that we use to build our environments where we live in cities or communities, and the waste ultimately have to be reabsorbed back into nature. So this is the resource flow model that we work with. And in ecological footprinting, there's two ways we measure this. One is we look at the relationship between ecosystems and the built environment by monitoring the economic inputs and outputs. What is the economic activity from which we extract resources from the ecosystem, put into our environmental built environments, and then manage the waste? So that's economic input output, econometric accounting. Another way is I'll get into, which we'll work with you on, is more direct accounting based on real consumption. So the ecological footprint takes that metric of how are we using nature services to support our lives and translates it back directly into the land types necessary to provision the resources we need to live. Forest land for producing wood products, paper, furniture, buildings, materials, construction materials, energy land. It's forest land that's exclusively used for the sequestration of carbon dioxide. And that also accounts for the oceans, which absorb a significant amount of carbon dioxide and actually are at saturation, which is why we're seeing acidification of the oceans now and corals dying around the world. Grazing land is for the animals that are we're using for fodder. So this is timber licenses, animals that are on marginal land in vast grassland areas. That's different from cropland. Cropland is highly fertile land. So many of our pastures are actually cropland. If you can grow crops and harvest them on the fields, then it's cropland, whether or not you're using it for grass-fed animal production or if you're producing food on it. And the cropland is not only used to produce food for us, it's used to produce food for our animals. And so domestic animals as well as pets. So, I mean, cows, domestic cows, chickens, but then also, our dogs and cats. Urban land is land that has been converted into the built environment. It's often cropland, sometimes it's forest land, but it's now appropriated for built uses. And then finally, the fishing area where we get our proteins from the sea. So these are the different land types that ecological footprinting measures. And ultimately, as I mentioned, there's 12 billion hectares of ecologically productive land and sea available to support all of us. So the different methodologies, the original methodology was invented in Vancouver, and it's based on national statistics that are then derived down to a community. We call it the compound method. So this is, if anyone's familiar with our ecological footprint, the work by Naogh and Rees, this is the methodology where we look at total local production plus imports minus exports. It's a top-down, again, mentioned, not usually it's national data, usually it's economic input-output tables that are being used. The benefit of this method is it's comparable, it's comprehensive. The challenge is it's not locally responsive. So you get a number, but you can't disaggregate that number. And for smaller communities, it's harder to get this data. You increasingly just look like a subdivision of a bigger city. The reverse method, the compound or component method, is a bottom-up method. It relies more on local data, and these methods can be mixed, by the way. I'm just giving you a sense of how which is weighted more in one way or the other. So the bottom-up data, it's locally driven. It relies heavily on municipal and regional reports. It can rely on surveys, so original data that you collect yourselves. It's not as comparable because often there's differences in how these studies are done. There's often gaps in the data, but it is very locally responsive. So you will get a fairly good picture of what's going on in your community. But remember, if anything, it'll be an underestimate. So the ideal is a hybrid between the two. What we're going to work with you on is mostly a component bottom-up analysis, and we derive it through different domains of consumption, looking at food, buildings, consumables, and wastes. So the products that you use, transportation, how you get around, and water. And then we break those down into understanding what's the material component, what's the embodied energy, which means the stuff you're not seeing, but actually went into producing it. So if you open your tap and you get water out of it, there's embodied energy there because there was a pump somewhere along the way that got that water from the ground into your tap, into your cup. Operating energy is the real-time energy that's being used, so the electricity to run the lights or this computer so I can talk to you. And built area is the area of your buildings or anything that is appropriated away from nature for our own use. So it could be a parking lot or other things like that. So the definition of One Planet Living, I really like Shar's definition of sustainability. We'll be working as well with this idea that it's a lifestyle that if adopted by everyone could be supported indefinitely by the regenerative capacity of Earth's ecosystems. So again, echoing what Shar was saying, you know, on Galiano, ideally you'd be living within the capacity of what your island could generate. But chances are very high that you're probably appropriating resources outside of your island as well to support lifestyles there. And that's what we'll try to find out. And then getting to One Planet Living is a lifestyle that if adopted by everyone could stay within global ecological carrying capacity. So within what Earth's systems could produce year over year. And right now, numerically, remember I talked about 12 billion hectares of global ecologically productive land and 7.8 billion people. So it comes out to about 1.5 global hectares per person. But if we want to get serious about climate and start regenerating and sequestering carbon emissions, then we're really looking at getting down to half a hectare, and that's subsistence living. So big challenges ahead, and there's all kinds of opportunities, hopefully, that we'll find to reduce our footprints. Many of you are probably living very sustainable lives if you're producing your food locally and not traveling much. There is an iterative relationship here as well. And so this is, I think, important. There's things that your community can help you with in terms of land use and density, building heights and massing, how buildings get built, the transportation infrastructure, the utility services, open spaces, protection of natural features. And then there's things that we have control over as individuals, what kind of food we eat, how big our dwelling size is, whether or not we own a vehicle, whether or not we travel by different modes for work, our pleasure, and how much we consume. So this is an important relationship. It's cities working together with their local governments. And I'll just wrap up with a bit of a context. So globally right now, the Earth is already an ecological overshoot. So we consume at least 40 or 37% more than what Earth can produce year over year. And this number is probably already dated. So this year we celebrated Earth Overshoot Day. I think it was again August 30th, but last year it was already in July. So with COVID, the impact pushed it back, but we were, that means that within 6 months, 6 to 7 months, we've already used globally what the Earth can produce in a year. So thank you. I'm happy to answer any questions, look forward to working with you. And if you're interested to learn more about this or what One Planet Living looks like in the Vancouver area, I'm giving a TED Talk tomorrow at TEDx Abbotsford, and I'll be getting into showing more detailed information for Vancouver's ecological footprint and the Metro Vancouver area, actually talking with people there about One Planet Living. That's it for me. I'll stop sharing. Happy to answer any questions. Oh, and I should just mention, I'm sorry if my image is blurry. I don't know what to do about that, but I am 50 now, so it's probably better looking this way for me, for you.
Thank you, Dr. Moore. Yeah, wow, that was some great background information and definitely really informative. So thank you so much for joining us. And just a note for everyone, I've put the information to sign up for the TED Talk tomorrow in the chat box. So the first link is for some information on the speakers, where you'll find Dr. Jennie Moore, and then the second link is to register. So up next in our speaker series, we have Dr. Beate Rader, who's a professor of integrative geography and coastal research at the University of Hamburg in Germany. And she jointly holds the position as head of the Department of Human Dimensions of Coastal Areas at the Institute of Coastal Research. Her research emphasis lies on the awareness of intercultural differences in the nature-culture interaction and the importance of public participation approaches in the development and adaptation of environmental management strategies. Her current research interests focus on climate proofing of a sustainable development in social ecological systems on coastal areas and small islands, as well as the risk perception and its impact on adaptation strategies in the context of global climate change. Dr. Rader wasn't able to join us today because of the time difference in Germany. However, she kindly provided us with a recording to share. Dr. Rader will start with a brief recap of the ecological footprint, and then we'll move into sharing her experience calculating the ecological footprint of an island. Oh.
Hey, Louisa, not getting the sound through.
Oh,
you want to
okay.
try sharing your screen again and
Yeah.
hitting the sound button?
Yep. I don't think this is the correct screen.
Hello, this is Beate, calling from Hamburg, Germany. Greetings to the island of Galiano. When Adam Huggins contacted me about your endeavor to assess the ecological footprint, I felt very excited and pleased. You're taking up a once Canadian concept, the ecological footprint, and you try to investigate how big the footprint of your island's lifestyle is on the Earth's resources. The ecological footprint is actually a Canadian concept. I learned to know it when I was on a sabbatical on the west coast of Canada at the end of the 90s. The ecological footprint concept was developed by Wackernagel and Ries in 1997, and it accounts how much land area is needed to supply all goods and demands and degrade the waste of a society. It's based on the global hectare idea. An area with global average productivity available or needed to supply demanded resources. And of course, it's only an approximation because it's very, very difficult to calculate the area you would need to produce, let's say, a TV set. But still, footprint accounts the biocapacity for individuals, for cities, states, and it can be applied for islands. It illustrates global ecological constraints. A proposito, constraints. Did you know that the Earth Overshoot Day 2020 was August 22? Since August 23, we are actually living beyond the Earth's resources. And we are using more land and more resources than the Earth can supply. I took the concept and carried it to Germany and did a study on the island of Helgoland, the only German high sea island, approximately 40 kilometers off the coast of the mainland of Germany. It's a closer look of the island, which is actually just a rock in the sea. Geologically, it's red shell limestone or Muschelkalk. The vegetation has to be very resistant due to the rough maritime climate, and very typical is the Klippenkohl, the cliff-colored. On the right-hand side on the picture, you see the symbol of Helgoland, well known all over Germany, the so-called Rote Anna, which is nothing else but a erosion remnant, a cliff needle, at the northern tip of the island. The island is very small. Its size is 1.7 square kilometers, divided into two parts. The main island in the front, and the dune in the back. And Helgoland and the Helgolanders are very, very special. Historically, we had a changing occupation history. The Danish occupation was replaced by German, then by British, and since 1952, Helgoland is German again. Its function changed from a pirate's nest in medieval times to a naval base, to a duty-free area, to a tourist destination, and nowadays I would say that the most important part of Helgoland is the nature reserve. Socio-economically, Helgoland is small too, with a population of only 1,500 people. We have almost exclusively services as the mainstay of the island: tourism, science, administration. And another specialties: there is no cars allowed on the island. And of course, as being in a temperate climate, we do not need energy for air conditioning. We started our study on the island of Helgoland with a mapping exercise. I took a group of students to the island and they had to map house by house their age, their structure, their function. What you can see is that the building structure is characterized by a high density. And what is hindering for any modernization purposes, we have strict preservation orders on the island, so you can't just change the housing. The percentage of non-sealed area is about 82%, which is quite okay for a small island of that size. The traffic connection to the mainland is via ferry and plane, and as I mentioned before, the traffic on the island is characterized by no cars. We studied this lifestyle of Helgoland via a population survey, asking the people about their consumption patterns and their preferences. Just for example, we asked them about their meat consumption, about their fish consumption, and about the origin of the food they are consuming. And as well, we asked them about their preferences of organic or non-organic food. We collected as well information about energy and water. The electricity supply, for example, has changed from a diesel generation just recently to wind energy, which is produced offshore, of course. There is no place on such a small island for wind turbines. Water supply is based on a desalination plant, and both electricity and water is characterized by high prices and low consumption. On the other hand, the waste disposal, separation in cardboard, recyclable, bulky waste, hazardous material, residual waste is very common, but all is exported to the mainland. The survey results show that 61% separate everything except compost on the island. And in the summer season, the waste is 10 times higher than under normal conditions. At the end of our study, we calculated, based on the global hectare, the area consumption in Helgoland. According to the categories and types of consumption, we found out that about 1/3 is used for food production, 1/3 for housing, a little more for consumer goods, and transport is of minor importance. The calculation resulted in 6.8 hectare per capita is needed to support Helgoland's consumption currently. By the way, 1 hectare is 2.47 acres. A comparison study in Berlin, in the capital of Germany, resulted in 4.41 hectare per capita, and worldwide, per average, we assume that there is about 2.59 hectare per capita needs. However, the global biocapacity is only 1.8 hectare per capita. You remember? Earth Overshoot Day 2020 was August 22. Since then, we're using more resources than the Earth can provide. In conclusion of our study, we calculated that there is a need of 62 times Helgoland to support the current lifestyle of the population. Wow, 62 times Helgoland. The ecological footprint assessment illustrates quite impressive the ecological overshoot of a society. And yes, small islands will always need more resources, in that respect, more land than they provide. Imagine, in Helgoland, every single chicken egg has to be imported. So it would be more fair to do a comparative assessment of the ecological impact among and between small islands. This is why I appreciate your endeavor of calculating the ecological footprint of Galiano very much. What we can do is addressing the sustainability by reflecting on one's own traces. We can reduce our impact only to a certain amount, but in the end, our recommendation of the study of Helgoland was the following. Do not just leave footprints, but check on the island's fingerprints and contribute to a sustainable world. I wish you a lot of fun and luck and success, and yeah, good luck with your study. And maybe one day I might be able to visit Galiano Island. Bye for now.
Many thanks to Beate for producing that for us. She's been extremely helpful in setting this project up and providing advice, and I'm sure she'll be working with us going forwards.
Oh, sorry. There we go. Sorry about that. I hope that you all heard the video. I tried to turn it up as loud as it would go. But yeah, that was very helpful learning about Dr. Ratter's experience. And we look forward to letting her know how the session went. She was very curious and excited about it.
We very much hope we can do better than 62 islands.
Yes. Helgoland is quite a bit smaller than Galiano, so we have our fingers crossed. So now I'm just going to pick up on one of the threads from the recording. I'm going to speak a little bit more to the ecological fingerprint. Dr. Ratter introduced the concept of the ecological fingerprint in a paper she wrote with Dr. Petzold called From Ecological Footprint to Fingerprint. The ecological fingerprint is defined as the attitudes, values, and self-image that an island chooses for itself with respect to global resource use, and it is measured to indicate a community's active contribution to sustainability. For example, what are people's behavioral patterns? How do people get their food? What sorts of products do they buy? Is the community installing solar panels or rainwater catchment systems? The footprint gives a quantitative measurement of how many resources a community requires, and the fingerprint complements this measurement by providing context and the story behind the footprint. Dr. Ratter and Petzold point to the importance of the ecological fingerprint in creating an awareness regarding unique sustainability features facing islands, and in fostering the policy change required for the large-scale reduction of ecological footprints. So now that we've finished our speaker series, it's time to turn our attention to what we want to do here on Galiano Island. Our vision is that an ecological footprint and fingerprint is developed for the entire Gulf Islands region, enabling the creation of an informed regional plan for climate action and sustainable living that is based on community values, science, traditional knowledge, Indigenous sovereignty, and a shared commitment to environmental justice. Starting here on Galiano, we want to create a model for ecological footprinting and fingerprinting that can be adapted to the surrounding islands and beyond. We want to demonstrate islanders as leaders in climate change mitigation and adaptation, and inspire other communities to take action as well. Ecological footprint methodologies are currently tailored towards the urban context, and they require access to centralized data records, many of which do not exist for the Gulf Islands. Therefore, with the help of our partners, we want to develop a framework for calculating the ecological footprint and biocapacity of small islands, using Galiano as a pilot. Developing a framework to capture the ecological fingerprint of the community will be of equal importance to us. The ecological fingerprint, which captures the culture and values of the community, is what ultimately determines if sustainability initiatives move forward and what those initiatives look like. Our hope is that an ecological footprint, fingerprint, and biocapacity measurement for Galiano can build climate action capacity, guide community initiatives, lend weight to programs that are already started and doing well, and provide baseline measurements to evaluate the success of future initiatives and policies. Given the lack of data that exists for Galiano and other small islands, developing a model for the ecological footprint must include a framework for collecting relevant data from the ground up with community initiatives. We are currently compiling data for the ecological footprint that already exists, and we are pinpointing where the gaps are that need to be filled in. For the biocapacity measurement, we are compiling data on land cover classification, and we are also looking at what is growing, how much, and how fast. For the ecological footprint, we are looking at 5 main categories of resource consumption, as Dr. Moore mentioned: food, buildings and the energy required to service those buildings, consumables and waste, transportation, and water consumption. So far, we have identified 3 main data gaps that we plan to fill in with the community data collection initiatives: individual food consumption and information surrounding local food production, the amount of solid waste and recycling produced on the island, and the amount of kilometers driven by Galiano community members. These initiatives will be discussed in more detail shortly. Once we have compiled all the data we collect from these initiatives and combine it with pre-existing data, the BCIT ecoCity Center will help us to calculate our ecological footprint, and the Global Footprint Network will help us to calculate biocapacity. By comparing the community's ecological footprint with the biocapacity of the island, we will find out if we can theoretically live within the means of Galiano. In other words, we will be comparing the amount of resources required to support the consumption and waste of the community with the ability of the island and its surrounding waters to provide these resources and absorb our waste. Can we live within one island? Or do we require 2, 3, or even 10 or more islands to support our lifestyles? No matter what we find, the important thing is that we use our results to learn and to make improvements. In addition to identifying opportunities to reduce our consumption, this approach should also identify opportunities to increase the biocapacity of the island and its surrounding waters. For example, through the protection of eelgrass beds and forests, and through restoration activities. We may also discover that there are some areas of ecological footprint where we are doing really well. In these areas, we can set an example for others. We can also use the ecological footprint to answer another question. If everyone on the planet consumed the same as the average Galiano citizen, could we live within the biocapacity of the Earth? Some surrounding municipalities have answered this question for themselves already. If everyone had the same lifestyle of the average Salish citizen, 2 Earths would be required to support their consumption. Vancouver received the same result. For Powell River citizens, 3.5 Earths would be required. How do we compare? In order to guide action in a way that makes sense for the community, the ecological footprint results must be looked at alongside the ecological fingerprint. As part of the ecological fingerprint, we want to hear Islander stories of what they are currently doing to promote a sustainable life, what they may have done in the past, and barriers they have come in contact with when trying to live a sustainable life. We also want to learn about changes to the land and to the community that Islanders have noticed over time. We want to hear everyone's stories and are committed to include those who are typically left out of community sustainability initiatives. Results from the ecological footprint and fingerprint will be woven together in various communication materials to identify challenges and opportunities for sustainable living on Galiano Island. A few examples of our proposed outputs include a technical report, a podcast, a magazine, an interactive web map, and a toolkit to support other islands in calculating their ecological footprint and fingerprint. We plan to share our findings with the community in early 2022. Now, I'm going to go through our proposed project activities in a little more detail so you know how you can get involved. The first way to help out is with our transportation data collection initiative. We know how many cars are on the island from ICBC data. However, we don't know how much those vehicles are driving. To participate in this initiative, simply let us know what your current odometer reading is, and then we will check in with you near the end of next year and let us know your updated odometer reading. We will post a survey link within the next few weeks to get this started. The next activity you can get involved in is the food program. We are lucky to have an SFU graduate student on board who will help us to develop and deliver this program in 2021. As part of the food program, we will be running food diaries to find out what people are eating and how much. And we will also be running a survey to find out how much food people are getting from off-island, how much food Islanders get from local farmers, how much food Islanders grow and hunt themselves, and how much food is wasted. We are also interested in talking with local producers to learn about their farming practices. If there are activities or aspects you would like to see added to this program, please let us know. It will happen once in the winter and once in the summer to account for seasonal differences. The last component of the ecological footprint that we need to gather community data on is waste, both residential and commercial. For our residential waste tracking program, there will be 2 options depending on how involved you want to get. For the most basic option, you just need to collect your waste and recycling as you usually would, and at the end of a 2-week time frame, let us know how much you collected. If you want more out of the program and are interested in gaining a better understanding of where your waste is coming from and opportunities to divert your waste, we can provide you with the training and tools to complete a household waste audit. In order to capture the amount of waste generated from the commercial sector, we will be conducting free waste audits. If you own a business or organization, we can help you to gain a better understanding of how to reduce your waste. Just collect your waste and recycling as usual, and we'll do the rest. Both the household waste tracking program and the business waste audits will be run in the winter and summer to account for seasonal differences and variations in the volume of tourists. We also have a variety of ways you can get involved to help us capture the ecological fingerprint of Galiano. In early summer, we will be mailing out a survey to every household on the island. Make sure to fill it out so your values, behaviors, and perspectives are captured. As I mentioned earlier, we are also very interested in listening to the stories of islanders. Therefore, we will be conducting interviews throughout the summer. If you are an artist, please let us know your ideas for how to engage the community in the project through art. We will be awarding many art grants next year, but if you have an idea already, don't hesitate to reach out and talk with us now. We also plan to get the local school involved with the project by exploring sustainability and climate change on the island through arts-based activities. In early 2022, we will be hosting a variety of events. To share our results, we will host a public community celebration for all ages, which will involve featuring artwork, student projects, and community stories. And of course, we will find out if we can live within one island and one earth. Our education team will also develop a program to run at the Galiano Community School. Following up with the community celebration, we will host a workshop to brainstorm how we want to leverage the ecological footprint and fingerprint results to take action as a community. Finally, we will host a separate meeting with representatives from the broader inter-island community to share our experience and to provide a model to support other islands in expanding the project. I will be updating our website to include a summary of the different activities I just listed and to introduce any new activities that arise. At the end of this session, we will share a link to a feedback survey where you can sign up for activities you're interested in, as well as provide feedback on the project. And we'll update you with the details and the dates for these different activities as the project progresses. We will also be seeking volunteers to help with a variety of different data collection tasks. Please use the survey to indicate if this is of interest to you. So now I'm going to hand it over to Adam to offer some final comments on this portion of the presentation and also to transition us over to the discussion.
Thanks so much, Louisa. That was awesome and super clear and way more organized than I would be. Thank you. Louisa did so much hard work pulling this this meeting together and preparing for it and everything. So yeah, you've done a fantastic job. Thank you so much, Jennie, and of course, Beate and Shar for presenting. And thank you all of you for sticking around and being interested in this. And I know most of you are kind of keeners and interested in this stuff and involved in community already. And so a big, important part of this project will also be to kind of bring people who are maybe not so involved in these things kind of into it in various ways so that we make sure that we get a really good sample of the island and the kind of people who live here. So just putting that in the back of your head. Louisa, do you have the questions to bring forward? So we ran a little bit long, so I'm hoping that people can stay just a little bit longer. We want to break out into groups really quick, and we're looking for your feedback. We've got a survey where you can kind of get detailed on that, and Louisa described that. So we're looking for all sorts of just ideas, thoughts, but immediately just for this meeting, since we have limited time, would love to know what kind of your vision is for a resilient community on Galiano, or what sustainability means to you. Shar and Jennie both shared excellent definitions of that. I'd love to know what you think about sustainability on Galiano Island specifically, and what the biggest barriers do you think are facing the Galiano community in general, or maybe you just personally in pursuing that, and how you think that this initiative could address those things. So those are some questions to guide the discussion briefly, and we're also open for any other feedback, which you can put in the chat or say out loud if you have ideas for other things that we should be measuring that maybe we're not planning on measuring yet. There's all sorts of wonderful tangents that can come out of this project as well, and things we'd love to track. So if we can break out into groups, I think we're going to take, what do you think, 5 minutes, Louisa?
Sure, maybe, yeah.
5 to 7 minutes or something like that. And then we're going to reconvene, and hopefully a representative from each group can share what the group generally discussed, so that Adriana can capture that in the graphic that she's been doing in the background this whole time while we've all been talking. And if you have any questions, yeah, just ping me on the chat.
Okay, here we go.
And we are back. Hey, everyone. Hope that nobody got cut off in the middle of a brilliant thought, as often happens in these funny little breakout rooms where you get jerked back in. But we had a great little conversation in our group. And I hope that everybody was able to elect somebody to kind of present for them. I will just give a very quick recap of what our group said. It was Sheila and Lorene and I and Taven from, let's see, mostly from Galiano, but Taven is from one of the surrounding Gulf Islands. Yeah, what an interesting multi-generational group. I think one of the most important things that came out of our group was just that this is an exciting initiative and that the data gathering is really important because the island has changed a lot over time. And those of us like myself who have arrived a lot more recently kind of take it for granted as it is when we arrive, but don't realize how much it's changed before that, kind of a shifting baseline syndrome. And so having an actual baseline for where we are now is a really great thing. Another thing that was spoken to is the importance of maintaining the diversity and equity of the island moving forward and having respect and recognition for all the different kinds of people and lifestyles here. So that there isn't, you know, kind of shaming or blindsiding of certain groups of people. And also that we should get the school involved, which I hope that we will do. So that was kind of the main feedback from my group. Let's see, do we have any other spokespeople? I see my audience.
Our group was talking about transportation and cutting down on using your car as much. Someone mentioned having was it Carol from the CRC on Galiano? A rail up to the north end of Galiano, I think. Yes. Yeah, but we were talking about more bikes, like and bike lanes on the island. So just, I guess, less fossil fuels in your transportation. She was joking. She said, "Okay." I thought it was a joke. I thought I'd get you to come on out and talk about it.
No, I love the idea of having a little train on the island. 100%.
Anyway. Right, and car stops and hitchhiking stops. That was another one.
There were 5 breakout groups total, so it looks like there's 3 more
I'll go at them
to share.
Hey, Rob.
Hey, since we're getting main island people to respond, Justine, and so our group actually had representatives from Galiano, Pender, and Maine, and it was really interesting to see that kind of mix. I would have loved to have longer to enjoy that conversation. A lot of great ideas came forward in the really brief period that we had. So we talked about rainwater collection and how about food production is going to have to increase as part of this, and the resources that are required for that food production are going to be associated with that and part of that solution. I talked about the economics of food. We talked about the solar and how the need for increased alternative energy sources, but not only that, but also the technologies associated with those technologies, things like heat pumps. So trying to leave more trees and move away from some of those forest cover reducing energy sources, and then the need for education as we go through the process, trying to get more and more people on board with some of these changes that we're going to need to make are going to involve a lot of education. Not bad for 5 minutes.
Not bad. Yeah, I'm sorry it was so truncated.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Hi, Dana.
Hi. We too talked about the desirability of a solar farm and increasing food production. A barrier was the number of part-time residents who sometimes participate differently, and lack of participation. And we didn't get as far as the third point.
That's great. Yeah, we are looking at both full-time residents and also at part-time residents, hopefully in these surveys, to kind of get a sense of the different ways that we live on the island. Yeah.
I think Shar
is that
framed
all the
our
groups?
group quite well if she would speak to it.
Let's see. Who was that just spoke?
It was Ed, and I was requesting that Shar speak to some of the thoughts that we had. I thought she framed it quite well.
Okay, sure. Yeah, so there was, I think there's 4 of us. I'm not too sure if there's 4 or 5 of us in the group. Ed, Zara, Lorelei, Shar, myself, and some of the barriers that we discussed were diversity and age. We talked about lack of housing, for vision. We talked about being on the same page. It would be nice that if we had a regroup of the island and see if we actually have the same vision. So we also talked about how some of the barriers is communication and non-participation of people. So, and how we saw this One Island, One Earth initiative addressing that is allowing everybody to be at the table. We thought that was fairly important. A couple of the barriers also, or I guess the challenges is finding the resources that we need on the island when we need them. So some people spoke to the repairs of their homes, or and I think that's it. If I forgot something, somebody chime in. We didn't quite finish and we didn't quite get to choose, but it was a great session.
Yeah, those are really great thoughts. Thank you everyone for staying around for the groups and for speaking in the short time that we gave you here. I'm sure you have a lot more to say. You can leave that in the chat with us. This whole thing is being recorded, as is the chat. So if you have closing thoughts, and then Louisa is going to post a survey if she hasn't already, that will let us know if you're interested in some of the data collection initiatives that we're doing and how you'd like to be involved, and also if you have additional thoughts for us. And of course, you can get in touch with Louisa and I by email or by phone, or you can knock on our door here at the Conservancy. We're here all the time. Yeah, if you have more thoughts for us, I'm sure we'll get to talk over the next couple months as we put the initiative together. So
yeah, sorry, just one other thing to add, as we did get cut off a bit early with the discussion. There is a collaborative online document that you can add your thoughts to as well, either in the chat box or there. So the first link I posted, it's to a Padlet board, and then the second one is the survey. So on the Padlet board, there'll be a variety of different sticky notes with the different discussion questions, and you can add your comments there or start another sticky note for a new discussion topic, and that will be open for the next week. So you'll have some time for some back and forth and to put your ideas up there as well.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much to all of you for coming. Thanks again to Shar and to Jennie and to Beate from far away. Yeah, we look forward to doing this with you in the coming year. Yeah. Oh, wait.
Are we doing the survey now, Adam, or not?
If you want to do the survey, like the sooner the better, yeah, you're welcome to just go ahead and do it. I won't end the meeting. Also, it would be lovely to see, Adriana, what you've produced for us. Almost forgot.
Sure. Would you like to maybe pin my video so that it's larger?
That would be great.
Or I can do it actually. Oh no, I can't. You have to do it for me.
I can see you now.
Okay, maybe if once I speak. If you want the spotlight, it'll be bigger. But I'll be very fast because I know we're running short of time. But thank you so much for the invitation. This was a very wonderful way to spend the evening. I will do a very quick run through. I began with some of the thoughts that Shar shared with us around the importance of true acknowledgement, which means inviting First Nations communities to the table. And I think I wanted to make that very central because I think that's very key for this project. And I think it's key for any work that has to do with sustainability. And then the importance of grounding ourselves in understanding the reality and know the threats that we're facing. And I was very, I didn't realize, or I didn't know about the planet overshoot and how much we're going on overdraft with our resources. So that's in this area right here, and how important it is for us to understand that that is a huge threat, and that's why it's so big. But then with the same idea of what this project is doing is still giving us hope that we can do something. So the ecological fingerprint is right in the middle, and how for this project and for anything that comes from this and beyond, we need everyone's input because we're working towards a regional plan for island action and sustainable living. And in this area that's missing here, it's the hope that this project will be an example for other islands in the region and beyond. And then down here, I'll include some of the thoughts that you were sharing around barriers and also ideas of how to move forward. So I want to thank you again for the invitation. And I hope this can be part of the roadmap for the future. Thank you so much.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. And yeah, we'll be sharing this after it's finalized with everyone who attended this session. So watch this place for a follow-up email for sure, where you'll be able to see this more. And maybe at our community celebration, we can put this up there as well to remember where we were at the beginning of the journey.
Here, should we repost the survey one more time, Luisa?
Yep, will do.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you all so much again. And for all I know, so many of you are involved in the good work already, taking this island and the surrounding islands in a better direction. So thank you for tuning in tonight.